October's a time for all things spooky and strange. And for insurance, it's no different. That's why this October we thought we'd bring you some of the insurance implications of some of our favorite scary movies and TV shows. We call it Insurance Things. Imagine you open a restaurant in a food court, in a mall, in a Midwestern town, that all of a sudden becomes the battleground between a ragtag group of kids and some adults that act like kids, and a hostile foreign government and an interdimensional evil that is trying to take over our world. If this sounds familiar, that's because it's Chapter 8 of Season 3 of Stranger Things, The Battle of StarCourt. So let's take a few scenes from this show and talk about, well, how does insurance work in these situations? Let's start here. Now, to set the scene real quick, these kids are in the food court at some ungodly hour, which leads me to ask this question that makes me sound like an old man, which is, where are these kids' parents? How do they not know where they are? But going beyond that, the question ends up being, how did these kids get into this mall? How come there isn't an alarm? How come there's no security guard company who's coming to shuffle these kids away? Now, the storyline goes that the mall is actually owned by a hostile government that's trying to weaponize these interdimensional beings. So maybe they're keeping the police away? Nonetheless, it's a lost control nightmare. You're just letting people in and out without any regard to safety or ability to be able to create an accident report if that was to be necessary. So I think that the liability here is going to be the biggest deal, both the liability for the owner of the business, for the owner of the mall, and for anyone who might be responsible for locking the doors or having the alarm go off. I love this next scene because the team decides to split up. Some staying in the mall and some going to go to a specialized communication device that's on top of a hill somewhere, and obviously they have to be driven. And all of a sudden, the only car available is the Todd father. Now, the kids are excited to jump in the car and go. But I have to ask the question, who's writing the insurance on this car? And is this kid a permissible driver on that policy? And what ends up happening if they get involved in an accident on their way to wherever they're going? The reality is we don't quite know. If the car is borrowed, maybe there might be some coverage, at least from the liability and comp and collision perspective. But if he's a driver who often uses the vehicle and is unlisted on the policy, then there may be no coverage for him as the driver. If they stole the car, there may be no coverage for them as the occupants and him as the driver because the vehicle's being used in a criminal act. Though there still may be some coverage for the owner of the vehicle in that situation. In this next scene, we come to one of the classic insurance conundrums. I mean, something that insurance nerds debate when we're taking our continuing education classes to no end, which is, which liability would cover here? The auto liability of the vehicle that's turned over and ran into the building, or the liability for the building itself? We actually have these conversations about what happens when the owner of an auto is the same as the owner of the home and accidentally drives the car into the home, which policy ends up paying. Well, in this situation, I'd argue that the auto liability and the general liability will come into play. Auto liability, obviously, while the car is moving, but then the vehicle ends up staying stationary and everything else starts to happen around it. So the question will be whether or not there was sufficient security of the premises, whether or not the premises was negligent in letting an auto drive into the mall, and those kinds of situations. There's two other coverages that come to mind with this scene because, well, the auto's tipped over, so would Roadside Assistance come and help move the car back? And then also, when the kids decide to move the car to use it as a shield, you know, they work in that restaurant right behind it. So what ends up happening is this a workers' compensation claim? Not to mention that in this particular scene, when you look around, not all the shops are secured and closed. In fact, Only about a third of them are. So the question comes to be, how do you protect your property if there's no security for your particular location? Most insurance policies require that you have an alarm and that your property be secured so that it be covered. They don't want kids just coming up and being able to grab things out of the drawers. Now this last scene, a news story breaking about the fire at the mall, is actually the best probable case scenario for the business owners inside the mall. A government cover-up saying that the official story is a sudden and accidental fire that caused property damage and unfortunately loss of life. Under normal circumstances, insurance policies are built to provide just that kind of coverage. Now I'd ask, if the hostile government was the landlord, how good was the lease in creating that separation, and how much are you going to have to indemnify that landlord for anything you might be held liable for? So beyond insurance, you might want to have, before you sign that lease, a good conversation with your attorney to be able to make sure that the lease is the most favorable one for you. Now, I'm pretty sure that most insurance companies haven't underwritten the policy for a hostile government trying to weaponize interdimensional beings, and one of the properties they insure being used as ground zero to defend our dimension. So to that end, like almost any insurance situation, you have to read your insurance policy to make sure that the coverages and terms and conditions of your policy would provide coverage even in the case of an interdimensional invasion. Now, not all policies are created equal, so take time to look through yours to better understanding. Ask your independent insurance agent. That's what we're here for, to help you better understand the products and the products available so that you can make your best insurance buying decision. If you don't have one or you'd like a second opinion, feel free to reach out to us at www.depozitoinsurance.com. There you'll be able to chat, text, email, start a quote right there online, find more videos like this one. If you like this video, share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. You'd also do me a great favor if you hit that subscribe button. We're going to make more fun videos like this where we look at insurance from, well, a different point of view, and also informational videos about your business. And make sure to check out the other insurance videos being released this October. Thank you.